Okay, so that's kind of an overview. Now let's look a little bit at respiratory anatomy and how this influences the physiology, and you just heard something about that. Anyway, so this is a cast of a human lung. It looks like a branching tree. And this is Ewald Weibel, who is a Swiss respiratory physiologist, anatomist, who has written books about the anatomy of the respiratory system. And he determined that there are 23 levels of branching in the respiratory tree. Okay, you start with the trachea. This branches into the bronchi, and these keep branching and become bronchioles. Okay, the bronchi are surrounded by cartilage. The bronchioles don't have cartilage around them. And cartilage means that they're not compressible. Okay, anyway, then we get down to the terminal bronchioles, which are at the kind of distal end of the system, and that's brought us down to level 16. Okay, now at the far end of the system, we have alveoli, one alveolus, multiple alveoli. There are 300 million alveoli in an adult human lung. Okay, and this is where gas exchange takes place. This is sort of the business end of the system. You start to see a few alveoli budding off the respiratory bronchioles down at level 17, and then there's more and more. And then finally you get towards the end where there are alveolar sacs and alveoli. Okay, so 23 levels of branching. Now the first 16 levels are called the conductive zone, and no gas exchange takes place. This is just tubes that air goes through by bulk flow, okay? So you're just moving air from outside the body into the body or vice versa. Okay, in the respiratory zone, this is where gas exchange takes place. So when we talk about respiration, in the respiratory system, we mean gas exchange. We don't mean metabolic stuff. Okay, now, if we look at a cross-section of lung, this is pretty much what it looks like. Now, the dark stuff is tissue, and the lighter stuff is mostly just air. Okay, I mean, there's some blood vessels, so that would be blood, but mostly this is just air. So there's very thin bits of tissue and a whole lot of air. So this is very soft, spongy tissue. I have this picture of a pile of soap bubbles just as a reminder that the alveoli are, the whole thing is three-dimensional, and each alveolus is surrounded on all sides by other alveoli. So it's all kind of, you have to keep that in mind. Okay, now at higher magnification on the right, we can see one alveolus. Okay, and the alveoli tend to be roughly 100 microns in diameter. And again, the light is air. And then in the walls, we see mostly a bunch of irregularly shaped dark objects. And these are red blood cells. Okay, these guys. So a red blood cell is a biconcave disc. So if you take a balloon and you poke your fingers almost completely together, it's like a donut, but the hole isn't patent. There's no hole. Okay, that's a biconcave disc, and that's the shape of a red blood cell. If you cut a cross-section of a red blood cell at random orientations, you get all these weird shapes. Okay, so the point of this is, here's one alveolus, here's another alveolus, here's another one. So we have alveoli filled with air, and in between we have mostly blood. I mean, so you can see that the blood is very close to the air, and this is what the last lecture was talking about towards the end. Anyway, so the idea is to get the blood and the air close together to maximize the rate of diffusion. If you take an alveolus and flatten it out, it looks like this, and in this case, the light parts are blood vessels. Okay, so we have a little pulmonary arteriole, and then this dense capillary bed. So practically the entire alveolar wall is just covered with all these alveolar capillaries. So the whole wall is basically available for gas exchange. Okay, if we look at total alveolar surface area as a function of the rate of oxygen consumption by different mammals, okay, and humans are up here, you can see that it's a linear direct relationship. The alveolar surface area is exactly as big as it needs to be given the metabolism of each species of mammal. Okay, so the surface area is very critical.